Hi everybody, I hope you're having a safe and decent Tuesday. In the ongoing saga of our police are racist and have been allowed to get away with having absolutely no oversight or accountability. Yeah, that's the title of the saga. I want to talk about Trump because today Trump signed an executive order on police reforms. Not just too little too late, like barely acknowledging them, but I will say, let's just, be cognizant of the fact that Trump is openly and publicly realizing that this crisis has gotten out of control. Instead of going to a church and talking about how Jesus loves him and the Christian community loves him and how Antifa's behind this is the first time he had to acknowledge through executive order that, through policy, that there is a desperate need for, from his perspective or from those who seek reform, that there are bad things happening with the police. I've yet to see him show any vulnerability because he lives in an alternate universe. So something must be showing right now in the polling that shows he's losing support, perhaps among Christians, based on how he is ignoring this crisis in police departments. If you're just joining us now, make sure to click like and subscribe and share on all social media. Of course, if you're not a patron, go to patreon.com/the Nomiki Show. $5 a month is where we start. And do I have a mug here? I don't. I think I went to go wash the mugs. We have new mugs and we have tote bags and we have stickers. All these things are now available thanks to our lovely team that provides them for us, puts them together. I want to fix my set because I think you guys can see that's not the third wall, but you can see with the behind the scenes. Okay, let's understand Trump's reforms. Now these are executive order. It's an executive order, so they will go into effect immediately. And Trump actually said that Congress can go further. So there's some jujitsu going on here. It's almost like he's putting pressure on the Democrats that he knows are weakened right now because they're not willing to step up and take immediate action and push forward reforms. So here are some of the reforms in his executive order. Ban on most chokeholds, vague. Co-responders to help police with calls involving drugs, alcohol, homelessness. Again, like when these things happen, it seems to be in the heat of the moment. It's where these officers, sometimes there are several officers there, but because there's this fraternal order, you very rarely see any officers, partners, whoever appears in the scene, pushing back, calling out that officer for their chokeholds or their inappropriate behavior, misconduct, violence, murder. Sometimes they just sit there silent. Sometimes they later will say something, but it goes nowhere. We've heard a few cases where officers at the scene have made complaints about officers who have a history of violence, but I don't know how co-responders arriving to the scene is going to make a difference. And then he says he's issuing federal grants for training. I don't know how you can untrain white supremacy. I'm saying this because the FBI is actively investigating right now organized white supremacy in police departments across the country, and they have been for years. And that spreads. When people are taught to act violently, it's very hard to untrain them to act violently. When people are taught that discrimination is accepted, that violence is accepted, it's very hard to untrain them. It's not like these cops don't know what the laws are, and in some cases they are trained to not use excessive force. I don't know how many police chiefs I've seen on air talk about this as they're reacting to live events or recent videos saying, this is egregious, this is excessive force, and this is not how they're trained. So what we're seeing is not that they're, of course they could be trained better, but what we're seeing is there are many instances where they're violating their existing training but there's no accountability. That's the key. There's zero accountability because the police unions across the country are fraternal orders, that's literally in their titles, and they look out for each other. So then he also says that he wants to institute a national database to track bad actors. What's a bad actor? Who has access to this national database? Who inputs it? How does it get put into the, what does this mean? It's gobbledygook. It's absolute gobbledygook. So Trump said when he was on stage that, quote, all Americans mourn by your side. Your loved ones will not have died in vain. We are one nation, we grieve together, and we heal together. He said that he had just finished a meeting with the families of people killed by violence, by police. My only thought is he received some pressure from, I'm not kidding, but like this is how he responds. Kim Kardashian. Seriously, I'm not trying to be difficult, but like who has been able to move him on criminal justice? And it was Kim Kardashian. Who on earth got to his ear? So either he's seeing that there is such a crisis, he actually has to acknowledge it because it's an election year, he might be slipping in the polls. I don't know what motivates Trump, but I think it's his ego. I think we can all agree on that he's very concerned about this election and getting reelected, and it's probably affecting his polls with conservatives, evangelicals, people who have morals, people who assign themselves to be Republican but don't consider themselves racist, not understanding the intersectionality between capitalism and racism. But I think, it's either that or it was probably like some celebrity, like Kim Kardashian getting into his ear. But either way, with that being said, this executive order is weak. It's something you'd see come out of a neoliberal's criminal justice reform. I think that the fact that he's acknowledging it shows that he's in a vulnerable position, but what he's put forward does not address the fundamental and systemic issues that police departments across this country have, which fundamentally stem from protected racism. The fraternal order of police unions across the country, these police unions, are covering up racism. They are covering up white supremacy that is being investigated in multiple units. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. When someone tells me it's not all police, I come back and I say, then fine. If it's not all police, then we need to have a more open conversation about the organized white supremacy that is infecting people so that when police chiefs and unions are covering up these behaviors, others are seeing it. Others that may not be part of that but are seeing it. The good guys in the police force are still seeing it. And so it's a collective. And they should feel angry that they're being lumped in with these egregiously horrible, racist, bad actors. So whatever the proportion is, we need to come to an understanding that cities like Camden, which dismantled their police departments, if you don't know about that, look that up. It's a fascinating case about how they decided to defund and dismantle Camden, New Jersey. They had such an outrageous number of deaths by police force and violence by police that the city council decided that it was time to dismantle the police force. And the results have been very good. The Camden model is used as a model. We should all look into it because they have transformed their communities to be more responsive and honestly, you take this money, as we know too well from this crisis, it's educated so many of us about the defund police movement. You take the money into community investment. You take the money into public education, which is underfunded. You take the money and you put it you put it into food programs, community food programs, pre-K and 3K, which is something that we have in New York. Preventative and diversionary programs. This is the kind of reallocation of resources when our federal budget is investing most of its money into the military and police and so little on the infrastructure of society. It's come to the point now where crime is down across the country, historically down, and yet our police budgets just keep growing. Well, what would be the reasoning for that? It's not, crime is not down because of policing, as we're seeing. When you show up with force, people get angry, especially when it's discriminatory force, when it's not based on anything, when it's I mean, the guy, and it's just, how many of these stories do we have to hear? You show up in a Wendy's parking, in a drive-through, you fall asleep. Does that mean that you get killed? That, I don't even know. If I had fallen asleep in a Wendy's parking lot or drive-through, I'm pretty sure nobody would have called the cops on me. I'm pretty sure that even if the cops showed up, they would knock on my window and say, move on, wake up. I'm pretty sure all of these things would have never happened to me the way that they did for that man, the way that they keep doing over and over and over again. So I'm going to go through some of the reforms that I'm looking into right now with different leaders. It's pretty crazy. Hang on a second. Some of these reforms are pretty mad. I mean, they make sense. So I want you guys to see Donald Trump's reforms and compare it to someone like Ilhan Omar. So I've opened up Ilhan Omar's reforms. So just a reminder to everybody, Trump's, quote, reforms are ban on most chokeholds, co-responders to help police with calls involving drugs, alcohol, or homelessness, federal grants for training, and a nationwide database to track bad actors. That's what his executive order on police reform includes. Now, compare that to someone like Ilhan Omar, who is putting out a plan to reimagine our criminal justice system. So she starts off with saying that the U.S. Spends $182 billion each year towards incarcerating people. It does not include prisons, by the way, as far as I remember. There's consistently a 1 in 3 chance that a black individual, specifically a black male, will be imprisoned in his lifetime, compared to a 1 in 17 chance an individual who is white will be imprisoned. Hundreds of civilians are killed by police violence each year alone. And it seems like since this crisis has hit, we're seeing even more. I have no facts to verify that, but maybe we're just paying more attention. But you'd think with all the light being shined on cops right now, that they would be behaving a little bit more cautiously, or they would be advised to. But that's what I'm saying. You can't untrain. You can't untrain this racism. Because this is the moment where they should be on their best behavior when everybody is watching, and they're still shooting people. They're still shooting Rayshard Brooks, who was in a drive-through of a Wendy's, asleep. I mean, come on. All right, so compare, let's go back to Ilhan Omar's. So she's calling for a ban on private prisons and ending punitive practices like solitary confinement, fund preventative and diversionary programs to end the school to prison pipeline, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, restore felon voting rights, ensure that those being released from incarceration are fully supported in their transition back to society, invest in mental health care for incarcerated and for the recently released, pressure the FBI to end these harmful programs like countering violent extremism and the Black Identity Extremism program, which monitors and criminalizes Black communities, especially Black Muslims, because they used the terrorism, if you recall, in 2000 after 9/11. Everything was enforced, the FBI was working very closely with police departments, and so they set up counterterrorism units and spied on Muslims. And, when you add in racism, there's Black Muslims. Ban all racial profiling by federal, state, and local agencies. End the war on drugs, and mandatory minimum sentencing laws for low-level offenses, invest in public health approach to the addiction crisis, demilitarize police departments, and push for federal investigations into local departments who utilize practices like arrest quotas, and legalize recreational cannabis nationwide, and expunge the records and seek amnesty for those incarcerated for legalized offenses. So that is what we call a real plan. That's what we call a real plan. So compare those two. I mean, we're talking about Ilhan Omar, and I think there's some would say that doesn't even go far enough. That's just the beginning. He put end prison slave labor. Exactly. I mean, thank you. That's a great, look at you guys. Chime in, hit that super chat. We should put something together. I'm adding it to the list. So these are the kinds of solutions that should be presented. And people, let's not forget, Black and brown communities have been acutely aware, personally aware of this crisis for generations. I mean, it stems back to the original sin, the founding of America. It has just taken new forms and iterations. And more Americans are educating themselves right now on this criminal justice crisis and seeing just how systemic, how organized it is, and not seeing the solutions coming from Congress. And so to see someone like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar come forward and come up with a very detailed plan, and I think, for Donald Trump to put the pressure on Congress, fine, so be it. Ilhan, can't wait to see your bill, because that's what's going to shock him. Put the pressure on Congress. I think most Americans want to see these reforms. It's all about who presents them. But I think that the pressure should stay on Donald Trump, because he's the one who is winking and nodding to the police unions, Mitch McConnell, Republicans in Congress right now, but I think especially Donald Trump, who really has executive power to create oversight, to create accountability, and to push back against these police unions. But he is beholden, and we can't forget, he comes from New York, which is a very powerful police union, and he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times attacking the Central Park 8. Let's not forget this. Falsely accused youth after a series of check out, what is the name of that documentary? I think you guys know the name of the documentary about the Central Park. I think it's just called Central Park 8. 5, excuse me. I'm losing it today, guys. Just Central Park 5. It's what is it? Oh, it's just called Central Park 5. It's on Netflix. Talk about a long day, Central Park 5. And Donald Trump, had worked with the unions, the police unions. I mean, he used to go to their luncheon. He used to go to their, they have a gala every year, and they use that as a political tool to give money. The politicians give money to the police union. Don't forget, New York's a Democratic town, so you have Democrats and Republicans showing up, and the police union in turn goes out there and allocates funds to help elect these local lawmakers. So this is something that is deep. Not to mention that Donald Trump's father aligned, I think that's a very fair way of saying it, with the KKK. It is deep in us. Yes, When They See Us is another one, but there's an actual the Central Park 5. It's God, what is the name? There's a documentary on Netflix about it. One up a few years ago. But yes, When They See Us too. That's a dramatized version of it. Is that the right way of saying it? I'm not being fair in how I explain it right now. And I'm trying to look it up on my computer, which decided to freeze on me. The true story behind When They See Us. Here we go. It's BBC. So you can check that out. So they try to fact check and see how much of it lines up with what happened in reality. And Donald Trump, he was worried about his real estate. He was literally cooped up in his Fifth Avenue apartment looking over Central Park, and he would just watch the city all day long, and that was his vantage point. That's what reporters wrote about, and I believe it was Wayne Barrett wrote about recently. I mean, during the election, Wayne Barrett, before he passed away, the reporter who first wrote about Donald Trump, he, during Donald Trump's election, he had written about how Donald Trump would be perched up in his Fifth Avenue apartment complex, his Fifth Avenue Trump Towers, and he would look out the window in Central Park, and he was never on the ground. He was, in a car. He never walked the city of New York. He would go from building to building, high rise to high rise, in his fancy vehicle, whatever it was, his limousine. So, gee, I wonder why he doesn't understand what's happening right now. All right, guys, I just wanted to give you that quick update. I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. And make sure to tune in to our new show this week. We have Cori Bush, who's sensational. She's talking about her race and how difficult it's getting right now. She's running in Missouri. Cori, of course, comes from the movement to protect. Well, actually, I think she did come out of BLM, but I'm trying to remember what organization specifically in Ferguson. she talks about it in the show, so you want to check that out. And then Lauren Ashcraft is running for Congress, actually, in the district that would have represented Trump Tower. But she's running against Carolyn Maloney, and Lauren is an activist. She's progressive. It's my district. I don't live on the Upper East Side. I live in Astoria. It just happens to be two sides of the river there, the East River. Two very different vantage points, two very different lifestyles. But she's running to represent me. And then we have Jennifer Cohn, who is fantastic. She is an election integrity advocate and attorney, and she talks about how the Georgia elections, the machines that were malfunctioning and weren't there, the new reforms on the machines, there's some corruption behind it. Shocker. You definitely want to hear that. I actually told my mom, she was talking about elections recently, and I said, you've got to listen to my show. You're not listening to it enough. So, Kathy, if you're listening, make sure to listen and watch the show that's out right now. It's on YouTube right now. And if you're not subscribing, liking, if you're not a patron, go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. You are wonderful. Cori Bush is great. We support her. Send her love. Send her money. She's a matriarch candidate. Send matriarch love and money. We have some big, exciting announcements coming soon, so you definitely want to stay tuned. All right. Take care, everyone.